All right, so today we're going to do a deep dive into the world of finance, specifically Truist Financial Corporation.
TFC?
TFC, you got it, a big player, especially after that merger
Oh, yeah, BB&T and SunTrust.
back in 2019. So to really kind of unpack how this banking giant operates, we've pulled their recent 10K filings.
Their yearly report cards.
Exactly, for both 2023 and 2024. And for good measure, we've also got their first and third quarter 10Q filings from this year.
Oh, wow, so we've got a lot to unpack.
Yeah, so get ready. We're about to see what makes Truist tick, how they make their money, where their costs come from, and what they offer that makes them stand out from the crowd in the financial services arena.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's a fascinating case study to see how these legacy institutions have adapted to the ever-changing world of finance.
Absolutely. All right, so let's just jump right in. Where does their money come from?
Well, to start, their 10Ks tell us that Truist's revenue comes from two primary streams, interest income and non-interest income.
Okay, so pretty standard for most banks.
Yeah, pretty much interest income is the core of their business, what they earn from loans and those securities they invest in.
Right.
It's like they're using your money to provide loans and generate income.
So we're talking commercial loans, consumer loans, mortgages.
The whole nine yards.
Okay, and then non-interest income.
Yeah, things get a little more interesting there.
Yeah, fill us in.
So Truist brings in revenue from fees associated with their wealth management services.
Okay.
Things like managing trusts, investments, brokerage services. And then you've got your everyday service charges on those deposit accounts and before they partially sold it off.
Wait, hold on. Partially sold off. What?
Yeah, so before that, they were generating income from insurance premiums through their insurance holdings subsidiary.
We're going to have to circle back to that.
Agreed.
Okay.
One thing to keep in mind is net interest income.
Okay.
That's basically the difference between what they make on interest-bearing assets and what they pay out on their interest-bearing liabilities. Looking at the filings, Truist's net interest income for 2023 was significantly higher compared to previous years, primarily due to higher market interest rates.
So higher interest rates might not be the best news for borrowers, but it seems like they're working in Truist's favor.
It's the double-edged sword of finance.
For sure. All right, so we've seen how the money flows in, but obviously there are costs involved in running a financial giant like Truist.
Oh, absolutely.
So what are some of their biggest expenses?
The biggest ones for Truist are interest expense and personnel expense.
Okay, so interest expense, that's what they have to pay out on the deposits they hold and any money they borrow, right?
Right.
And then with a team of over 50,000 employees, I can only imagine what the personnel expenses are for salaries, benefits, and all those incentives.
That's a lot of people.
Right. And then on top of all of that, we can't forget about all those other non-interest expenses that are just essential for keeping the lights on and the systems running, things like occupancy equipment, professional services technology, all of those operational costs that just add up.
Yeah, it all adds up.
Okay, now their 2023 filing mentions something that caught my eye, a goodwill impairment charge.
Oh, yeah.
What exactly does that mean?
So goodwill impairment is basically when the actual value of acquired intangible assets doesn't meet the value that was initially recorded.
Okay, so like intangible assets, we're talking like brand reputation, customer relationships.
Exactly. Things you can't physically touch but still affect their finances.
So kind of like finding out that vintage record you thought was worth a fortune has a scratch that significantly reduces its value.
That's a great analogy.
Okay, well, we've covered how Truist brings in the cash and what it costs them to operate, but now let's bring it back down to earth.
Okay.
Why would I, the average person, choose Truist over any other bank? What's their appeal?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? What's their customer value proposition?
Yeah. What makes them stand out?
Well, their filings suggest they're focusing on a few key areas.
Is it just having the most competitive interest rates?
Well, while rates are a factor, they seem to be aiming for something more. They're really pushing this idea of a relationship-focused approach.
Oh.
And their 10K specifically mentions an integrated relationship management strategy, suggesting they're all about building long-term relationships with their clients and providing a whole suite of financial products and services that cater to their needs.
So it's less about transactional banking and more about being a trusted financial advisor,
Right.
a partner.
Right, a partner in your financial journey.
I like that. And it's not just individuals, right? They're also emphasizing their commitment to local communities and their dedication to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Absolutely.
That probably resonates with a lot of customers.
Oh, absolutely, for sure. And finally, they're highlighting their focus on innovation and technology,
Makes sense.
investing in ways to make banking easier, more efficient, more accessible.
So it's not just talk.
Right. And their quick adoption of SOFR, the Secured Overnight Financing Rate, shows they're willing to adapt to industry changes.
So they're trying to project this image of being both reliable and forward-thinking a bank for today's world.
And ready for the future.
Exactly. All right. But being modern and values-driven is practically the bare minimum these days. What truly sets Truist apart from all the other competition out there?
Well, their extensive branch network and customer base are definite advantages.
They are a major player in the Southeast.
And we can't overlook their diversified business model.
Okay.
They're not just a bank, they're also involved in wealth management and, to a lesser extent now, insurance. This diversification helps them stabilize revenue streams and mitigate risk.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. And there's another aspect that's subtly woven throughout their filings:
What's that?
their emphasis on company culture.
Now, how does company culture differentiate them? Isn't that more of an internal matter?
Well, it might seem that way, but they repeatedly highlight their values: caring, integrity, teamwork,
Okay.
aiming to create a positive and inclusive work environment.
Yeah.
And they believe this internal culture translates into a better service experience for their clients.
So happy employees equal happy customers.
That's the idea. It's about creating a work environment where employees feel valued and respected, which then translates into better service and interactions with their clients.
I can see that.
And their focus on DEI is a prime example of this. It's not just checking boxes, it's about fostering a work environment that reflects the communities they serve.
Right. Well, they've got the size, they've got the diverse offerings, this focus on creating a positive culture. It's all starting to come together.
It is.
But let's get down to brass tacks.
Okay.
What are the make-or-break operational activities that Truist absolutely needs to nail to make this whole business model work?
So here's where the rubber meets the road. In my view, the top three are credit risk management, liquidity management, and technology and cybersecurity.
Credit risk management, that seems like a no-brainer for any lender, right? You got to make sure those loans are going to be repaid.
You do, and the 10K filings go into detail on the strategies they use to manage this risk. They talk about rigorous underwriting standards, diversifying their loan portfolio, ongoing monitoring of borrower performance. It's all about minimizing defaults.
Okay, and then liquidity management. That's about making sure they have enough cash on hand to meet their day-to-day demands.
They had deposits, withdrawals, loan disbursements, that kind of thing.
Nobody wants a bank run.
And the filings highlight Truist's diverse funding sources and their approach to managing liquidity risk. This is so critical.
And last but not least, technology and cybersecurity.
Oh, in this digital age, protecting data is paramount, especially for a financial institution.
Yeah, their 10K filings definitely emphasize the ever-increasing importance of cybersecurity and the need to constantly invest in technology to stay ahead of the curve and be prepared for the bad guys.
It's a constant battle,
It is, and banks are a prime target.
especially with Truist promoting this image of a technologically advanced bank.
Yeah.
It's a bigger target on their back.
They need to make sure their systems are up to par.
Security is paramount in today's world.
Absolutely. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground already.
We have.
But let's dive deeper into some of the specifics revealed in these reports.
I'm game.
Where should we focus our attention next?
I'm particularly interested in taking a closer look at their loan portfolio, the heart and soul of any bank.
Okay, let's do it.
It's where they put those deposits to work and generate that sweet interest income.
All right, their loan portfolio. We'll tackle that right after this break.
Truist's loan portfolio is really a fascinating mix, broken down into all these different categories: commercial, consumer, everything in between.
Yeah.
They've got their hands in a lot of different lending activities.
Well, one thing that jumped out at me from their 2023 10K was they originated like $119 billion in loans using SOFR.
Wow, yeah.
That's a pretty big shift from the traditional benchmarks, isn't it?
It is. It's significant. SOFR, the Secured Overnight Financing Rate, is a relatively new benchmark for lending rates. And Truist's adoption suggests they're at the forefront of this transition in the industry. Many see it as a more reliable and transparent benchmark than the older ones. So, it's a sign that they're embracing change and looking to the future of lending.
So SOFR is like the new kid on the block, and Truist is one of the early adopters. That's pretty interesting. But let's get back to the loans themselves. What can you tell us about their commercial loan portfolio?
Sure. So their filings show that a big chunk of their commercial loans falls under commercial and industrial, or C&I for short.
Okay.
These are loans made to businesses for all sorts of reasons, from working capital to financing new equipment.
So helping businesses grow, it's a core function of any bank.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's not without its risks, right?
No lending to businesses can be tricky, and Truist recognizes that their filings really emphasize their strict credit risk management practices, especially when it comes to C&I lending.
Hmm.
They're laser focused on assessing how creditworthy a borrower is, keeping an eye on industry trends, and making sure they're not overly exposed to any one particular sector.
Okay, so it's a delicate balancing act. They want to support businesses, but also protect themselves.
Right. Precisely. That's where their expertise and experience come into play.
Hmm.
They have teams of analysts who are constantly crunching data, trying to anticipate, which industries are likely to thrive and which ones might be heading for rough waters.
It sounds like a high-pressure job trying to predict the future of the economy. But that's the nature of finance.
Mm.
I suppose. Now let's shift gears and talk about the everyday consumer. What about their consumer loan portfolio? What kind of loans are they making to individuals?
Sure. So they've got a diverse mix of loans within their consumer portfolio.
Right?
This includes things like residential mortgages, home equity loans, auto loans, credit cards, the kind of loans most people are familiar with.
Yeah, that's the bread and butter of personal finance.
It is.
But these types of loans can be vulnerable to economic conditions, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A downturn in the economy could mean trouble for borrowers and lenders.
Yeah, people lose their jobs, they face unexpected expenses, and sometimes struggle to make those loan payments.
And that's where those credit risk management practices we talked about become even more crucial.
Yeah, Truist really needs to be able to anticipate these shifts in the economy and adjust accordingly.
Exactly. They need to have systems in place to identify potential problems early on, adjust their underwriting standards as needed, and work with borrowers who are facing hardship.
Okay, so finding that balance between being prudent and being compassionate.
It's a tough job, but an important one.
It was now one thing that stood out to me in their filings was their focus on specific segments within consumer lending. They specifically mentioned their service finance and Sheffield
Oh,
portfolios.
yeah.
What are those all about?
Those are great examples of how Truist is finding these niche markets within consumer lending,
Hmm.
going beyond just those standard loans and tailoring their products to meet the needs of specific groups.
Okay.
So Service Finance specializes in financing home improvement projects.
Oh,
So if you're planning a kitchen remodel or adding a deck, they're the ones to talk to.
okay.
And then Sheffield focuses on providing financing solutions for manufactured homes, a segment of the housing market that's often overlooked by traditional lenders.
So it's like they're recognizing that a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work in today's diverse market.
Exactly. They're being more targeted, more strategic with their lending.
All right, we've talked a lot about the different types of loans Truist makes, but what about the flip side? Where do they get the money to fund all these loans? They can't just conjure it out of thin air, can they?
They wish, but no. The primary source of funding for most banks, including Truist, is deposits.
Okay, deposit. So that's the money that people and businesses deposit into their checking accounts,
Mhm.
savings accounts, certificates of deposit, all those funds that customers entrust to the bank.
Exactly, all those funds.
So it all comes back to building trust and attracting those deposits.
Yeah,
That's why banks' reputation and their brand image are so important.
they're very important, and their filings highlight the significance of core deposits, which are basically those stable and predictable deposits from their loyal customer base.
Okay, the deposits they can really rely on.
The ones they know will be there, providing a solid foundation for their business.
But depending solely on deposits can be risky, can it? Especially in times of economic uncertainty when people might be more hesitant to deposit their hard-earned cash.
It's a great point, and that's precisely why banks, including Truist, have other funding sources to tap into.
Right. What?
They have access to the Federal Home Loan Bank System, or the FHLB and the Federal Reserve's discount window.
Okay.
These are like backup options, providing a safety net in case those core deposits aren't enough.
So they're not putting all their eggs in one basket. They've got multiple funding sources to ensure that they can weather any financial storms that might come their way.
Exactly, and they can also tap into the capital markets by issuing debt securities.
Okay.
This is essentially borrowing money from institutional investors who are looking for a return on their investment.
So it's a multi-pronged approach to funding.
Mm-hmm.
They're not just relying on deposits, but they're exploring these other avenues to ensure they have the financial resources to support their lending activities.
It's all about having a diversified funding strategy. That's how they maintain stability and flexibility in a constantly changing financial landscape.
Makes sense. Now, we can't talk about banking without addressing one of the most crucial aspects, managing risk.
Oh, yeah.
It's the elephant in the room,
Yeah.
isn't it? It seems like every decision a bank makes revolves around managing risk.
It's woven into the very fabric of their operations. Truist filings are full of references to their risk management framework. It's clearly a top priority
Yeah, they know that in the world of finance, risks are lurking everywhere.
everywhere, and it's all about identifying, assessing, and mitigating those risks.
Okay, so let's break it down. What are the biggest types of risks that they're facing? What keeps them up at night?
So we've already touched on credit risk. That's the risk that borrowers might not repay their loans,
Right.
but there are other risks to consider, like interest rate risk and liquidity risk.
Okay.
Just as important, if not more so.
All right, so interest rate risk. That's the risk that fluctuations in interest rates could negatively impact their profitability.
Exactly. If interest rates go up, the value of their fixed income assets, like those bonds they hold, could go down. And if interest rates fall, they might have to pay higher interest rates on deposits, squeezing their profit margins. It's a constant game of adjustments and recalculations.
So a real balancing act, trying to stay ahead of those interest rate changes. And then liquidity risk. We talked about liquidity management earlier, but what exactly is the risk they're trying to avoid there?
So, liquidity risk is the risk that they might not have enough cash on hand to meet their short-term obligations.
Okay.
This could happen if there's a sudden surge in withdrawals or if their access to funding sources dries up unexpectedly.
It's not good.
It's like running out of gas on a road trip.
I can relate to that.
But in this case, it's not just a minor inconvenience. A liquidity crunch for a bank could be disastrous.
Yeah, it could spiral out of control very quickly. That's why they have those backup funding options that we talked about. The FHLB, the Federal Reserve's discount window, those are their emergency reserves.
Exactly, their lifeline in a crisis.
Yeah. Okay, so it's all about being prepared for the unexpected, having a plan B, even a plan C.
Absolutely.
But there's another type of risk we haven't even touched on yet. Operational risk. What does that entail?
So, operational risk is the risk of losses stemming from internal processes, systems, or even people.
Okay.
Think fraud, human error, cybersecurity, breaches, anything that can disrupt their day-to-day operations.
And in this digital age, cyber threats are a huge concern for banks, right?
Huge. We're hearing about data breaches and hacking attempts all the time, and Truist's 10K filings explicitly highlight the risks of cyber attacks and data breaches.
Yeah.
They talk about having robust cybersecurity systems in place, educating their employees about security protocols, constantly updating their defenses to stay ahead of those criminals.
It's like a never-ending arms race trying to outsmart those hackers.
It is.
But beyond cybersecurity, what are some other examples of operational risks that Truist is facing?
Well, they mentioned the risk of regulatory compliance failures.
Right.
The financial services industry is heavily regulated, and any missteps can lead to hefty fines and penalties.
Yeah.
They have to dot every I and cross every T to stay on the right side of the law.
So a real compliance nightmare.
And with all the mergers and acquisitions in the banking world, integrating different systems and processes can also be a source of operational risk.
Like merging two companies, it's like trying to blend two different recipes. It can be messy if you're not careful.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks.
Anytime you bring two companies together, there's a risk that things might fall through the cracks. Systems might not be compatible, processes might conflict, and cultures might clash. It takes meticulous planning and execution to ensure a smooth transition.
So Truist's risk management framework needs to be comprehensive and adaptable.
It does.
They need to be able to handle everything from those sophisticated cyber threats to complex regulatory changes to simple human error.
Exactly. It's like having a multi-layered defense system in place to protect them from all angles.
Okay, well, after diving into all these risks, I have to admit I'm starting to feel a little nervous about my own money.
Oh.
It seems like there are dangers lurking around every corner.
Well, remember, these are just potential risks, not guarantees of disaster.
Right.
And Truist is clearly taking risk management very seriously.
Yeah.
They're constantly evaluating their risks, implementing controls, adapting to the threat landscape. They're not just sitting back and hoping for the best.
Right.
They're being proactive and vigilant.
That's reassuring to hear, but beyond just managing risk, what are some of the key strategic initiatives that Truist is pursuing to grow and thrive in the long run?
Right. So they repeatedly emphasize their commitment to digital transformation.
Okay.
They want to make banking easier and more accessible for their customers through online and mobile channels.
So recognizing that the world is increasingly digital.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They need to keep pace with those changes.
If you're not in the digital game, you're
Mhm.
falling behind. People want to be able to bank from anywhere, anytime.
Exactly. And they're not just talking about offering basic banking services online.
Right.
They're investing in cutting-edge technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning to enhance their digital offerings.
AI in banking, that sounds futuristic.
It's coming.
What are they using these technologies for? How does AI actually improve the banking experience?
So AI can be used in a multitude of ways. It can personalize the customer experience, providing tailored recommendations and insights based on an individual's financial habits and goals. It can be used to detect fraud in real time, protecting customers from unauthorized transactions and security breaches, and AI can automate many routine processes, making banking more efficient.
So it's like having a virtual assistant who's constantly working behind the scenes to make your banking experience smoother and more secure.
That's a great way to put it. AI has the potential to really revolutionize the banking industry, and Truist is positioning itself to be at the forefront of this transformation.
Okay, but technology is only part of the equation. What about their human capital? With over 50,000 teammates, they've got a massive workforce to manage.
That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people, and finding and retaining talent is a major challenge for any company, especially in today's job market.
It is.
So what are they doing to attract and retain those top people?
Their filings highlight the importance of attracting, developing, and retaining top talent.
Okay,
They're not just looking for people with technical skills, they're also emphasizing the importance of cultural fit, shared values, and a passion for their mission.
makes sense.
They want to create a workplace where people feel valued, respected, and empowered to contribute their best work.
So creating a culture of excellence, a place where people want to come to work and do their best.
Exactly. And they're not just paying lip service to diversity. They're actively seeking out diverse perspectives and experiences, believing that a more diverse and inclusive workforce leads to better decision-making and innovation.
So diversity is not just a box to check. It's a source of strength and competitive advantage.
Absolutely. It's about creating a workplace that reflects the communities they serve.
All right, now we've talked a lot about Truist's strategy, but how are these initiatives actually translating into financial performance?
Right. The bottom line.
Yeah, are they actually making money?
Well, their financial statements paint a somewhat mixed picture.
Okay.
On the one hand, they've seen strong growth in net interest income, largely driven by those rising interest rates we discussed.
Okay, that's good news for shareholders.
It is higher profits usually translate into higher dividends and stock prices,
Yeah.
but it's not all sunshine and roses. They've also been hit with some significant expenses, including that goodwill impairment charge we talked about and merger-related restructuring costs.
Ah, those are the growing pains of mergers and acquisitions. Bringing two companies together is never easy.
It's not, and those integration costs can add up.
Yeah, and they've also had to deal with some challenging economic conditions,
They have.
like inflationary pressures and a slowdown in certain sectors of the economy.
Those external factors can have a big impact.
It's a tough environment for any business, but banks are especially vulnerable to those economic headwinds. They're so intertwined with the overall health of the economy.
You're right, but that's why their diversified business model is so important. It provides a buffer against those shocks.
Right.
They're not putting all their eggs in one basket, so if one sector is struggling, they can lean on their other business lines.
So it's a dynamic situation. They're facing challenges, but they're also making strategic moves to position themselves for future growth.
It's a constantly evolving landscape.
Absolutely. And that's what makes analyzing a company like Truist so fascinating.
It is. There's always something new to learn, new trends, to analyze, new challenges to overcome.
Speaking of learning and discovery, I'm ready to dive even deeper into some of the more nuanced aspects of Truist's business model.
Okay, I'm with you.
What's next on our agenda?
So let's shift our focus to their capital allocation strategy, their approach to mergers and acquisitions, and their long-term vision for the future.
Okay, these are the areas where we can really see how they're making decisions that will shape their destiny.
Right, their future.
Exactly. I'm ready to explore those areas. Let's see how they're planning to navigate the complex world of finance and position themselves for continued success. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in our deep dive into Truist Financial Corporation. We've explored their revenue streams, their cost structure, their risk management practices, even delved into their loan portfolio and funding sources.
Yeah, a lot of information.
We've seen how they're managing risk, adapting to a digital world, and building a strong culture. But to really understand their long-term strategy, we need to examine the engine that drives a company's growth.
It's capital allocation.
Capital allocation. Sounds
Yeah.
so technical. Break it down for me. What does it actually mean?
So think of it this way. It's all about how a company decides to use its financial resources, its capital, to create the best possible returns for its shareholders.
Okay.
It's like a game of chess where every move has consequences and you need to think several steps ahead.
So it's about making those smart investment decisions, allocating those resources wisely to maximize value.
You got it. Companies have several options when it comes to capital allocation.
Okay.
They can invest in organic growth.
Oh,
meaning expanding their current operations, developing new products, or entering new markets.
so building from within.
Exactly, leveraging their existing strengths to fuel growth.
That's the build-it-yourself approach.
Right, but sometimes it's easier to just buy something that's already built.
True. So mergers and acquisitions?
Exactly. Inorganic growth, buying other companies to expand their reach or their capabilities.
It's a faster way to grow, but it comes with its own set of risks and challenges.
Definitely. And let's not forget about returning capital to
Oh,
shareholders,
yeah, that's always a popular move.
especially for investors looking for a quick return.
Right.
Companies can return capital to shareholders through dividends, those regular payments to shareholders, or share buybacks where they repurchase their own shares from the market.
No,
This can boost the value of the remaining shares.
makes investors happy.
Exactly. So it's like this three-way balancing act: invest, acquire, or return, trying to find the right mix to satisfy investors and fuel long-term growth.
And each decision has its own set of risks and rewards trade-offs that need to be carefully considered.
Absolutely. Now, looking at Truist's filings, it seems like they're taking a pretty balanced approach to capital allocation.
So they're not putting all their eggs in one basket.
Right. They're diversifying their strategy, which is a smart move. They're investing in organic growth,
Okay.
as evidenced by their focus on digital transformation and innovation, and they're pursuing inorganic growth through strategic acquisitions,
Right.
carefully selecting companies that align with their long-term goals.
And remember that insurance holdings situation we talked about?
Oh, yeah.
They sold off part of that business, which freed up capital for other investments.
Yeah.
But they've also made some acquisitions in other areas, strategically expanding their footprint.
Right. They're constantly evaluating the market, looking for opportunities to strengthen their position and expand into new areas.
Okay. And they're also returning capital to shareholders through dividends and share buybacks.
Keeping those investors happy.
Their 2024 10K
Yeah.
mentioned a significant increase in their TBVPS tangible book value per share.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good sign, right?
It's a very positive indicator. It suggests they're creating value for their shareholders, making those shares more valuable over time. But capital allocation isn't just about maximizing returns in the short term.
Right.
It's also about making investments that will ensure the company's long-term sustainability.
Okay.
They need to think about the future, not just the next quarter's earnings report.
So thinking strategically, planning for the long game, making decisions that will benefit the company for years to come.
Exactly, and that's where Truist's commitment to environmental, social, and governance, or ESG factors, comes into play.
ESG, it's become such a hot topic in the business world.
Mhm.
What does it actually mean for a bank like Truist?
So it means considering the environmental and social impact of their investment decisions, as well as their corporate governance practices.
Sure.
It's about recognizing that a company's impact extends beyond its financial performance. They need to consider their impact on the environment, their employees, their customers, the communities they operate in.
So being a responsible corporate citizen?
Exactly. Doing business in a way that benefits not just shareholders, but all stakeholders.
I like that. And their filings do highlight their focus on things like diversity and inclusion, community engagement, and sustainable finance.
Right. They're making a conscious effort to align their business practices with their values.
They're even talking about integrating ESG factors into their credit risk assessment process, considering the environmental and social impact of the loans they make.
It's a recognition that ESG factors can have a material impact on a company's financial performance and long-term viability.
So it's not just about doing good, it's also about doing well.
Precisely, they believe this holistic approach will create more value for all their stakeholders, shareholders, customers, employees, the communities they serve.
It's about building a sustainable business that can thrive in the long run. Well, after taking this deep dive into Truist Financial Corporation, I'm walking away with a pretty positive impression. They seem to be a well-managed, forward-thinking institution with a strong commitment to their stakeholders.
I agree they're not without their challenges, but they seem to be navigating the complexities of the financial world with a sense of purpose and a focus on the long game.
Right.
They're adapting to a changing world, embracing new technologies, and building a culture that values diversity and inclusion.
It's been fascinating to peel back the layers and see how this financial giant operates. But I think the real value of a deep dive like this is that it sparks curiosity and inspires further exploration.
Absolutely.
It's not just about understanding a company's current state, it's about asking questions, and seeking deeper insights.
You're right, it's about empowering listeners to think critically about the business world, to understand the forces that shape our economy, and to make informed decisions.
We've provided the framework.
But the real learning happens when listeners start asking their own questions and seeking their own answers.
So to our listeners, we leave you with this challenge. What will you do with the insights you've gained today? How will you apply them to your own financial decisions or your understanding of the business world?
The journey of financial literacy is an ongoing one, a constant process of learning and discovery, and we hope this deep dive has equipped you with valuable knowledge and a renewed sense of curiosity.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those important questions.